2 houses on Willard Key and are driving out to Tallgrass. Because that's when the first tourists come down, Webb says. October. No, she says. Actually, the name is an odd combination of Seminole and Spanish. She goes on to explain that when the Spaniards first came to southwest Florida, the Seminole word thaqui for big was already in place, and they added the Spanish word cabo to it and came up with the name Cabo Thaqui, or Big Cape. This eventually became slurred and contracted to Cabo Thaqui, which was then finally Hispanicized to Cabo Octubre, which, of course, was Cape October in English. Or so the story goes, she says, and turns to him and smiles. The eastern rim of October Bay is jaggedly defined by US 41, more familiarly known as the Tamiami Trail. Frank Lane, the owner and sole proprietor of Lane Realty, believes that Tamiami is redneck for to Miami. Alice doesn't know if this is true or not, but if you follow 41 south, it leads eventually to Alligator Alley, which then crosses the Florida Peninsula to the east coast and, of course, Miami. So maybe he's right. There are 4 keys off the Cape's mainland. Beyond those so-called barrier islands lies the vast Gulf of Mexico. Sail out due west from the Cape and eventually you'll make landfall in Corpus Christi, Texas. If you're lucky. So how old are you, Alice? He asks her. May I call you Alice? Sure, she says. So how old are you, Alice? He asks again. She doesn't think that's any of his business, but he is a client, and neither does she wish to appear rude. 34, she says. Married? Widowed. Sorry to hear that. Yes, she says. Any children? 2, a boy and a girl. Tough break. Yes, she says again. How long ago? He asks. You know, she says, I'm sorry, but I'd rather not talk about it. Okay, he says and shrugs. Sorry, I didn't mean to intrude. That's okay, she says, and then softens her tone. It's just that it's still painful. Must have been recent then, huh? He says, and when she doesn't answer, he says, Sorry. They ride in silence for several moments. Was it an accident? He asks. She doesn't answer. Sometimes it helps to talk about it, he says. I figure he had to have been young, right? I mean, you're only 34, so it had to have been either a heart attack or some kind of accident, am I right? He drowned 8 months ago, Alice says. And Webb remains silent for the rest of the trip to Tallgrass. The house was built in 1956, she tells him, named for Jennifer Bray Healy, who had it designed by Thomas Cooley and his son. They're famous Cape October architects. Never heard of them, Webb says. They designed a great many of the buildings downtown. I'll take you to see some of them later if you like. The Healy House is considered a hallmark of the Cape's modern architectural movement. They're standing in the oval driveway in front of the house. Alice is deliberately postponing that moment when she unlocks the front door and opens it onto the spectacular panoramic view of Little October Bay. It never fails to knock the socks off any prospective buyer. The house fell into disrepair after Mrs. Healy died, she says, searching in her bag for the key to the lockbox. The present owners, Frank and Marcia Allenby, bought it 2 years ago. They've been renovating it ever since, all in accordance with historic guidelines. The rules are that you can make changes provided you don't alter any historically or architecturally significant aspects of the design, quote-unquote. Sounds like bureaucratic red tape, Webb says. Well, no, not actually. The regulations are there to protect the environment and the property itself. This is a landmark house, you know. He says. Ah, here it is, she says, and finds the key to the lockbox, and then opens the box and removes the key to the front door. The owners are up north, she says over her shoulder. They also have a home in North Carolina. She inserts the key into the lock on the front door, twists the key, opens the door, turns to him and says, Please, come in. The view is truly breathtaking. From just inside the front door, one can see through the living room to the sliding glass doors at the rear of the house, and beyond those doors to the wooden platforms that drop gradually from one to the other down to the dock, where a 32-foot seaward eagle is moored to the pilings. Out over the bay, a squadron of central casting pelicans swoop low over the calm, silent waters. "Nice," Webb says. "And you get this same magnificent view from every room in the house," she says. "Was it a boating accident?" he asks. "Yes," she says briefly, and leads him through the living room, past the fireplace. "That's fossil stone," she says. "The chimney's been restored with a new flue and top. The cedar floors are new, too, throughout the entire house." "Out here, on the bay?" he asks. "The Gulf," she says, again briefly, and opens one of the sliding doors. "All the windows and doors were replaced during the renovation. This hardware's all new," she says, and steps out onto the first of the platforms. "The decks were all replaced and enlarged, too," she says. "Highest grade, clean-cut, dense dry wood and stainless steel screws," and walks him down to the dock itself. "Note the swimming pool and privacy garden just off the master bedroom," she says. The Allenby's power cruiser sits bobbing gently alongside the dock. The dock is new, 40 feet long. It can hold one large and two small boats, or a second boat up to 20 feet, dual 50-amp service to the dock, full access to the Gulf of Mexico, no bridges on the way. "When did you start selling real estate?" "Almost 6 months ago," she says. "Lots of widows in the real estate game," he says. "I hadn't noticed." "Widows and divorcees. Keeps him busy, I suppose." She wants to tell him that this is more than busy work. This is her way of starting a new life, her way of coping with the aftermath of her husband's senseless death, when her very existence was shattered. She catches herself, looks out over the water. "It's so utterly still here," she says. She allows him to stand on the dock in silence for a while, savoring the solitude and the majestic view. "Come," she says, "let me show you the rest of the house." Inside again, she shows him the kitchen, with its custom teak countertop and hand-built, hand-painted kitchen cabinets, its Millet and Thermidor appliances. "The water softener has been added to the entire house," she says, "and there's a new two-tone air conditioning system with all new ducts. All the plumbing and plumbing hardware was replaced, too, including a new line to the street. There's a new irrigation system, a new well pump, a new shell driveway. In effect, you'd be getting a brand-new house that just happens to be a historic landmark as well." She takes him into the large room on the southern end of the house. From Frank Allenby's spacious desk, the view over the bay is spectacular. "This is actually a second bedroom," she says. "It has its own private bath, but the Allenbys live here alone, so Frank uses it as an office." "They say it takes a year," Webb says. "I beg your pardon?" "To get over a divorce or a death." She says nothing. "I've been divorced for 9 months now." "You suppose they're right?" he asks. "I have no idea." "Are you over it yet?" "I get by," she says. Which isn't true. She's struggling. She's struggling mightily. "The master bedroom is at the other end of the house," she says. "It's identical to this one. Think of the house as a beautiful butterfly, the living room and dining room as its body, the 2 bedrooms as its wings." "How large is the living room?" 20 by 30. It's a good-sized room." "And the bedrooms?" "Each 15 by 20. Come, let me show you the other one. Total square footage under air is a bit over 3,000. She leads him through the house again, past the living room and into the dining room, and then through to the master bedroom. "From the bed you can look right down into the privacy garden and the pool," she says. "How much are they asking?" $1.7 million. They've been offered $1.4 million, but they turned it down. I think they might be willing to let it go for $1.6 million, somewhere in there." "That's a lot of money," he says. "Not for this location." "For any location," he says. $1.6 million comes to more than $500 a square foot." "You've got to figure $1 million for the property alone," she says. "You won't find many other views like this one." "Well, I'll have to think about it," he says, and her heart sinks. She gets back to the office at noon. They exchange phone numbers, and Alice promises to have some new houses to show him by tomorrow morning at 9, when they'll go out looking again.